What's happening, Who Dat Nation? I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. What's on today's menu? It's these three things. So we're going to be talking about a Danielle Hunter trade because the Vikings are actually open to trading him away. We're also going to discuss a wild Chase Young trade idea. And I know we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but there's some new developments. There's some new buzz that I'm going to discuss. And then at the very end of today's show, we're going to talk about Michael Thomas and how he compared Derek Carr to Drew Brees and why he thinks that the two quarterbacks are very similar. But guys, let's get into it. Let's start talking about Danielle Hunter to the New Orleans Saints because there are reports out there that the Vikings are receiving trade calls for Danielle Hunter. And quote, the interest is real, sources say. And so what I will say here, guys, is do not sleep on the New Orleans Saints here. I'm not saying that I think the Saints are one of these teams that are calling him, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints were one of these teams that were interested in trading for the experienced veteran pass rusher. And he's a phenomenal football player, and when you look at the numbers, you can see that. He had 378 tackles across his career, 71 sacks, 7 forced fumbles, and 85 tackles for a loss. And I think that Danielle Hunter could be a great addition to a very quality defensive line that might just need a little bit of extra juice. And if you were to go and trade for Danielle Hunter, the Saints would pick up a cap hit of $5.5 million, which is very affordable considering the Saints have around $14 million to spend. So I think that this is an interesting idea because you can pay Danielle Hunter, but you still have some cap space left over to potentially add to the roster later on in the season, later in the offseason, or potentially down the stretch ahead of the trade deadline or something. So it's still flexible and you still have money to spend. And an interesting chat fact for you. We have chat stats. We've talked chat facts before. So here's an interesting one. Danielle Hunter is the fastest player in NFL history to reach 50 sacks. And I think that having a guy who can get after the quarterback alongside guys like Cameron Jordan and Isaiah Foskey, Nathan Shepard, Brian Brzee, I think that he could fit into this defensive line depth chart very, very well because Carl Granderson, he's a quality football player. I do believe that Isaiah Foskey will eventually take on starting defensive end snaps. However, if you wanted to be able to use Isaiah Foskey more rotationally, you didn't want to put the pressure of being a starting defensive lineman in the NFL on a rookie. I think that going and getting a guy like Danielle Hunter makes all too much sense. And you guys are familiar with producer Seeps and my guy Patrick Seepman. He's a part of our live shows. He's always producing. He's always on the ones and twos for us. He actually threw out this trade idea because he's a Vikings guy. He's in charge of all of our coverage here. He's a Vikings fan. And I wanted to get his gauge on this. So his trade idea is down below. It's a 2024 first-round pick and a second-round pick. So that's what he wants to get. But I want you to tell me, what would you give up for a Danielle Hunter trade? Because I don't know if I'd want to give up a first and a second-round pick, but you do have to consider he's a quality football player and he's a guy that can really do some damage on the defensive line. So let me know, Who Dat Nation, what would you give up for a Danielle Hunter trade? And while you're down there, scroll on over to the sub button and hit that sub button. It's big, it's red, it's right there, it's impossible to miss. I need you hitting that red sub button because you will never miss a thing around your New Orleans Saints. We are approaching 15,000 subscribers. I'm not desperate because I know we're going to hit it, but I am hungry to go and hit that goal as soon as possible because I want to provide the best Saints news, rumors, and updates, interactive videos that are fun and entertaining and informative. So guys, help us reach 15K. Never miss a thing around your New Orleans Saints and lock us in by subscribing today. All right, so let's talk about it. Bleacher Report laid out some Chase Young trade ideas in a recent article, and it included the New Orleans Saints, which I think is an interesting idea. And just to kind of set the scene for you, if you aren't familiar with what's going on with the Chase Young trade discussions, the Commanders recently did not pick up Chase Young's fifth-year option. Rather than doing that, they invested in guys like Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. So the reports are that the Commanders are, quote, open to listening 2 trade offers. And in 2020, he was the Defensive Rookie of the Year coming out of the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Predator was a freak of nature that season. And since then, though, since 2021, he's only played in 12 games. So that is a little bit concerning. There is injury issues. But here's what Bleacher Report had to say as for why it would make sense for New Orleans to trade for the pass rusher. They said New Orleans has struggled with its young pass rushers, partially because of injury. Peyton Turner has suited up for 13 games in 2 seasons because he's been unable to stay healthy. At least in Chase Young's case, he finished the 2022 term on the field and played an increasing number of snaps each week. In this transaction, the Saints and the Commanders would exchange defensive ends with an injury history, but New Orleans would get a player who's had more flashes. With Chase Young, Cameron Jordan, Carl Granderson, Tano Passanio, and rookie second-rounder Isaiah Foskey, the Saints would have a solid stable of pass rushers. So I'm going to get into some more thoughts and some more analysis and my opinions on this and what that trade idea actually looked like. But I'm curious what you guys think. Rate your interest for me on a scale of 1 to 100. 1 being like, I have no interest in him. I don't want him. Keep him as far away from the black and gold jersey as possible. Or 100 being like, send everything we have to get Chase Young here today. I want you guys to let me know. And if the Saints were to trade for Chase Young, he's going to need some Saints gear. And if you need some Saints gear, we got this awesome deal from Fanatics. It's a 2-pack t-shirt combo at chatsports.com/Saints combo. And if you don't see this number, I'm pointing it out right here, 40% off. You can get these 2 t-shirts for 40% off. It's not one or the other. You get both of them for 40% off. And if that's not a good enough deal for you, I don't know what to tell you. So go get geared up. Chatsports.com/Saints combo. The link will be available in the comments section in the description of today's video. So let's compare Chase Young and Peyton Turner in their first 2 years. Now, Chase Young, this past season, he only played like 3 games because of an ACL tear. So I wanted to do Peyton Turner a little bit of a solid here and just do the first 2 years because there wasn't really many stats for Chase Young in his last season, or in 2023, or in 2022, excuse me. So in the first 2 seasons, Chase Young had 70 tackles, 13 tackles for a loss, 16 quarterback hits, 9 sacks, and 6 pass breakups. However, Peyton Turner, on the opposite end, wildly underperformed in comparison to Chase Young. 28 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, only 3 quarterback hits, only 2 sacks, 0 pass breakups. Chase Young also had a handful of forced fumbles. Peyton Turner hasn't had any success in that realm of the game. So in my personal opinion, I'd rather have Chase Young over Peyton Turner. And I understand Chase Young, the injury issues are there. The injury concerns are there. But let's not act like Chase Young is a bad football player when he's on the field. You saw the stats. You can go and look at the tape. Chase Young is a significantly better football player with a lot higher of an upside, with a lot higher of a ceiling than Peyton Turner is. And I think that it would make sense for the Saints to bring in a guy like Chase Young because he can replace Peyton Turner as a future defensive end. And here's my personal perfect world. Cameron Jordan, obviously you go win him a Super Bowl or whatever, but when Cameron Jordan retires, you can have a 1-2 punch of a guy like Chase Young. I'm not saying it has to be Chase Young, but a guy like Chase Young and Isaiah Foskey. You have that 1-2 punch on the defensive ends, and I think that would be a phenomenal move for New Orleans to explore and but potentially pull off. And as for the Bleacher Report trade idea, I wanted to show it to you guys. I think it's a lot. I really do think it's a lot, but there is, things to consider here. So the Saints would receive the defensive end in Chase Young and a 3rd-round pick, which is notable because the Saints currently don't have a 3rd-round pick. So the Commanders would receive your 2022 2nd-round pick, your 2024 2nd-round pick, your 2024 6th-round pick, and then you also send him Peyton Turner to get him off the books to, you go player for player kind of swap here. And as for the draft capital in 2024, I know you guys may not like the idea of giving up a 2nd-round pick, but here's what you got to work with. You only have 5 draft picks in 2024 as it stands right now. the comp picks haven't been assigned. That won't come until, after this season is done, closer to March. We also won't see a lot of, trades and stuff happen right now because we don't have a ton of picks. So my point being, if you were to go and trade, this is what you have to work with. So I get it why the Saints would give up a second-round pick in this case. I don't know if I'd want to mortgage a second-round pick. You'd have to give up a day 2 pick at least. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. So would either have to get creative with it, but this is just so you guys can have some reference here. But because I want to ask you this question. Grade the Bleacher Report trade idea. Considering the fact that you don't have a third-round pick, you'd have to give up a second. You could even get a little bit creative and do something different, but this is what Bleacher Report cooked up. So I want you to let me know what you would grade this trade idea. And to round things out, to wrap things up, guys, we'll get out of here in just a second. But Michael Thomas, he is ecstatic to be working with Derek Carr and actually compared him to a Saints legend in Drew Brees. And as for what Michael Thomas had to say on his new quarterback, if you didn't know this, by the way, they were very integral, or they were very important into bringing each other in or keeping each other around in the Saints locker room. But here's what Michael Thomas said about his new quarterback. He said his demeanor stands out. Just everything. Just watching him from when he gets in the building, kind of like Drew was. When he was watching film, you could learn from him in the locker room, and you could learn from him anywhere in the building. You could learn something different from them that makes how they are, that makes them how they are. And I respect Derek Carr a lot. I love talking football with him. The dude loves football. And as I said earlier, in case you missed it or in case you didn't know, Derek Carr and Michael Thomas were big influences on each other, ending up in New Orleans for this season. Derek Carr talked a lot to Michael Thomas when he was getting recruited to come to New Orleans. Michael Thomas was talking a lot to Derek Carr in order to stay in New Orleans. And after Derek Carr was signed, if you remember, Michael Thomas tweeted out the prayer hand emojis, was just super pumped and super ecstatic. And also, the new quarterback had some, very positive things to say about his new wide receiver one. He said, when we're talking the same language. We've talked about a lot in just a couple of days. If he went out there and ran certain routes, I know exactly what he's going to do, and I'd put it on him. And guys, I just think that this is going to be such an exciting season for Derek Carr and for Michael Thomas. They're already building that chemistry. They're two players that have a big chip on their shoulder with a lot to prove. And I think that it's 100% fair to look at Derek Carr and look at Michael Thomas on the outside looking in and be like, the Saints don't have that great of a team. There's not really much to be excited about. These two players, they're all right, they're okay. Michael Thomas just doesn't play. He's going to be hurt anyway, whatever. There's all of that you can take into consideration, and I understand it. But that being said, there's a lot of things for both of these players to prove. There's a lot of ways for these two players to not only make each other better, but make the team around them better. And there's plenty of reasons for the Saints to succeed, and I think it all starts with these two guys to my right, to my left. I don't know. I'm in reverse, but these two guys right here. So let's go, Who Dat Nation. If you are ready for Derek Carr and Michael Thomas to prove the doubters wrong, I need you typing Who Dat in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the thumbs up icon on today's video. And as always, y'all stay golden. We'll catch you next time.